So, welcome to the 2019 season preview for P2P Pro. Pretty exciting to finally be getting the season started today. So, let's run through and check out how things might change. We're still going to have a lot of the same top teams. We'll kind of just do a pretty brief overview of each team and run through and see if they're going to improve their prospects. So we'll start with the Arizona Cardinals. They had two big losses in losing Cromartie, who went over to Washington football team, and Brandt. I'm unsure where he ended up. But they had a pretty decent draft. They got a young corner. They're definitely in a full rebuild mode. They've got a new GM, so should see some changes over the coming season. They've definitely got talent. They've got some talent at QB, though they're probably going to need to find a smarter QB to improve. They've got not much of a running game. They're going to want to improve that. They've got a fast guy there. They're good on the line. Definitely have some solid players there. Tight end, they might need to improve. They've got some wide receivers that look pretty good, but they might need to pick up some more talent. Probably Parr is their main guy. He's pretty good. Probably a solid guy to start out with. They've got first overall pick. Who was it? Greg Diaz. Greg, that's a weird spelling of Greg. He looks pretty good. Speed and agility look great. Should be a solid player. They topped off with a couple other picks at corner in Philip Vera and James Willis in later rounds as well. So that's probably a long-term solution. Those guys are going to get a lot of playing time over there, especially Diaz. Definitely the youth movement in the secondary for Arizona. But overall, they'll probably improve a little bit, but I wouldn't expect them to get more than the 4 wins they got last season. But be exciting to see. Maybe they'll surprise some people and win a few games. But I expect another high draft pick for Arizona. So we'll move on to Atlanta, and Atlanta's been surprising. They kind of moved through the playoffs. They've got a lot of QB talent. They've got Waylon, who's kind of been entrenched over there, and he'll probably be their franchise QB for the time being. But they also picked up a nice player in Silas Saunders in the draft, and Frederick Sipes. So they're decent youth movement over there, and Waylon should be pretty good. He's in his second season. He should help lead Atlanta. They kind of had a surprising run in the playoffs, so should expect them to improve, maybe win 10 games this year. But they're still kind of in the Wild West without a GM, so that might be asking a lot out of this squad, even with talent on it. They picked up Witten, who was on Washington football team last year, which is really going to help them in the tight end game. They've got decent, if not great, wide receivers. Oliver Sanchez is good in his third season. They've also got Brian Dunlap, who's in his 8th season. So good targets in the passing game. Their secondary probably needs a little bit of love, but not terrible there. They've got Doug Vetter over there maintaining the main corner spot. Only knock on him is really he's just low in agility. So, but they've got Reardon coming up in his second year. So this is a youth movement, really a lot of youth over in Atlanta. So if they can put it together and continue on their run from last year, they really should be able to get back into the playoffs. On to Baltimore. So Baltimore, they've got Joe Flacco still entrenched as the starter over there. They've kind of underperformed for sure. Ray Rice, they're a squad that's kind of kept things together since the original 2010 season. It's still the Flacco Ray Rice combination. They really don't have great wide receivers. They're not great at the corners. It's another youth movement. Definitely a lot of youth on this squad. But they're still gonna struggle at the bottom of the AFC South. Wouldn't expect them to improve much. Flacco's aging. Ray Rice is aging. So we'll see if they can improve. Buffalo Bills. So Bills are interesting. They've got Brian Miller. He's kind of entrenched as the starter over there, but they did just pick up a nice draft pick in Gerald Duran. So interesting to see if the Bills move on from Miller, as they haven't been great the last few seasons. They've got new management over there, so should see some improvement, but they're in a tough division with Miami and defending champion New England. And I don't expect Buffalo to supplant either of them this season. But they do have some talent. Really excited about Duran. We'll see if they kind of decide to go with Brian Miller. They kind of bought out his contract and brought him back to save a little money. But they're going to be paying for it for a few seasons. Brian Hartline, they've got some good receivers for sure. A bit older though, so they're going to need to work on finding some youth and developing some players there. But they've got McCourty and Jenkins on the corners. They should be solid there. They really have a lot of talent. So if the new management can put things together, then they might surprise some people over there in the AFC East. I really like their talent. Looking over their roster, I mean, I feel like I could make something happen with this roster. Randall Rivers is great, really fast player, one of the fastest guys in the game. They've got good situation, decent line for sure. They could probably look to improve maybe a little bit on the tackles, but they're pretty good there. The Slater, who's kind of their main guy, probably he's just not very strong. And then you have Verdon, who's strong, but he's not good in the run blocking game. So it depends on what kind of scheme Buffalo decides to install. But they should be pretty good. But I still expect them to finish third in the AFC East. On to Carolina. So Carolina, they've still got John Bell. They've kind of cleared out the QB room, but they've still got Sean Link, who's a decent backup. The kind of knock on John Bell, his stats haven't been, quite up to his talent level since he's arrived there. But ever since they lost Nick Christian to over to Washington football team, they just really haven't had a lot of targets for John Bell to get to. They've got Pruitt, and that's about it. Nobody's really all that fast. They've got Pruitt. Rhodes is in his second year, and he should continue to improve, but he's not quite there being an NFL receiver. So Carolina needs some help for sure, or just some development, really, before I'd expect them to compete in the NFC South. But they've got a pretty decent roster. And John Bell, I mean, he's going to take them far, even though he doesn't have much of a supporting cast in the passing game. They do have Joe Black, who's a pretty nice running back, pretty deep at the running back position. Lots of speed over there. They don't have anybody that can really catch passes out of the backfield, and they're not the strongest running backs. I mean, Dunn's pretty strong. Joe Black's pretty strong, but they all could stand to improve. Their guard position, Pretty decent. They've got one solid, like really solid starting guard, but that's probably why they have 10 on the roster, is to run a bunch of platoons, because they don't have high endurance on a lot of players, so they definitely need to run a lot. They've only got 3 tackles, though, but they're going to be held together by Eugene Monroe. Solid player, really strong, just great left tackle. But on the other side, on their right tackle, they might be a little bit more suspect, as neither of their other tackles are very strong, and they don't have, quite where you'd want their blocking skills. But definitely pretty good. But without the wide receivers, kind of lack of talent in the secondary on defense. They've got some good linebackers. Good on the D-line, good enough anyway, not great. They could stand to improve, probably defensive end, and maybe stand to pick up another defensive tackle. But I don't expect Carolina to compete this season. They've got some talent deficits for sure against a lot of the better teams. And until they can figure out a solid number 2 wide receiver, it's going to be hard for John Bell to really get anything going. So he's probably going to struggle, throw a lot of picks again. But he's a solid QB. Still got a lot of time ahead of him, but wonder how soon until he starts complaining about the lack of targets in the passing game. So on to the Bears. Definitely expect the Bears to compete for the NFC North. Be a contender again. Garza should continue to improve. They've also got Wim Hartwell that they pick up, who's developing well. Solid players, Rizzo, Sheehan, that are all developing. And then they've got kind of one of the better running backs in the game in Alton LeBron. So reports are they're going to try and push his use enough that he can get to 2,000 yards. So he very well could do that, especially with the line they've got over there. Lots of strength. They really don't have a lot of great run blockers, though. That might be the only knock on their line. They've got Ross, who's a good run blocker, but kind of everyone else, like especially at tackle, a little bit low in the run blocking. But they're all extremely strong. So what they lack in skill, they're going to make up for just pushing guys around. So they should be pretty solid in the trenches. Tight end, I think they were looking to improve that this year. Not sure if they really did that. They've got 2 on the roster, in Olsen and Smith. But they might look for an upgrade mid-season via trade. Receiver room's pretty solid. They don't have a lot of handsy guys, but they do have one reliable target in Forrest and Bumgarner. And both of those guys will continue to improve. Bumgarner will probably be pretty solid once he gets his position skill maxed out. But Forrest is another solid, reliable target with good hands. But Bumgarner with his 6'6", 212 frame, I mean, that guy's just going to be a monster once he really smooths out and learns the position and gets up to NFL speed. Secondary, pretty solid. I'm going to kind of pick Bears to take. Man, it's tough between the Lions, Vikings, and Bears. It's hard to call, and you've still got the Packers, but I think the Packers, after moving on from Aaron Rodgers, he retired this past season, they might be a little bit in transition, but should be a pretty solid team out of Chicago. Hard to pick who's going to finish where, because you got kind of a 3-headed monster over there, and I really think anybody can win it. On to the Bengals. Bengals got a new GM as well. Got a talented QB in Siegel. It's just a matter of putting it all together. They've got three talented running backs. Decent line as well. Their tackles could probably improve a little bit. Good centers. They've got Jermaine Gresham at tight end, solid player, really speedy for a tight end, 261 with 90 speed. That's pretty incredible. So that guy's going to be solid for them, probably a main target in the passing game, but they've also got Macklin and Guadalupe Simons. They've got Donald Snow and Lanham that are all up-and-comers, so they've got a pretty solid wide receiver room. Their secondary leaves a lot to be desired, really needs a lot of development. But they've got some speed over there, so that'll help. But definitely just kind of youthful in the secondary, so they just need some experience, really. Same kind of with the linebacking core. They've got a couple, solid guys that have been around a while, and then a lot of fairly young guys after that. So 2 solid linebackers. They're good on the defensive line, defensive tackle especially, a lot of depth. Defensive end, Lynn Abrams, solid guy. Carlos Dunlap, another pretty solid player. But they just don't quite have the talent on defense. I think they've got a lot of talent on offense, so the offense should be pretty solid, but the defense is gonna struggle quite a bit. In Cleveland, they're really excited. It looks like, after 3 seasons, they're kind of already moving on from Matthew Allen. Allen has kind of been in and out of the lineup, and, he started every game. But he's been a pretty solid player, so I'm not sure what the angle is on moving on from Allen, but Sandoval, maybe it's just the fact that Sandoval won 3 championships as a part of that Utah team, and maybe he's just got a winning pedigree, but it seems like they're moving on from Allen for sure and going to go with Sandoval, but maybe they give Allen a little bit more time and put Sandoval behind him to learn maybe for a year or so. They really don't have a lot of depth on the line, so that's going to be an issue. They've really only got 1 backup for their whole entire line, which might be a pretty considerable issue, especially if you look at some of their endurance. So they've got kind of probably their main backup. Hopefully he can play several positions, but he's only got 64 endurance. So they might need to pick up, and there still are some decent guys to play backup. So we'll see what happens with injuries. But pretty solid. Not great tight ends. Wide receivers could maybe improve, but they just need to develop. It's a really young core. They've got Ruffin, who's a solid player, and he'll probably be their main target in the passing game. Maybe they'll get some stuff going out of the backfield. Jeremy Duong, after signing that big contract, he did all right last season, but he fell off of his averages. So he was averaging 4.9 per carry in Minnesota, 4.9 per carry after getting picked up by Washington football team, and then he dropped down to 3.7. So that might be an issue just with the Cleveland line not having a lot of depth and getting tired, putting a lot on those players. So maybe if they can improve their line and get some line depth, maybe get Duong going, that'll really help their passing game. That's kind of been an issue, I think. Averaging only 3.7, it's really going to be hard to get the passing game going. But maybe Sandoval can do it. He's been successful everywhere he's gone. So hard to say. Defense looks pretty good. I'd say Cleveland will probably be, they'll probably win the division, but they've got some new competition over there in the AFC South or AFC North. So should be a pretty good battle, but I expect Cleveland to be a playoff team, depending on how they get things working with Sandoval. On to Dallas. So Dallas, they've got Marlowe coming back. They really just need to find a way to overtake Washington football team. They win a lot of games, but they tend to, I think they went 12-4 last year. 2 of those losses were to the football team, and then they lost to them again in the playoffs. So it's just, they've got to just get over that hump. They've got the talent, they've got the defense, especially that linebacking core. I mean, I think they've got probably the fastest linebacking core in the game. Like, look at the speed of all those guys. 96, 92, just insane speed out of their linebacking core. So they really do a really tremendous job against the run. But they kind of struggle against the pass. So we'll see if Fed, tries to improve that in the offseason. They really could use some help in the secondary. They've got some young players, but to compete with Washington football team, they don't have anybody to the scale of Rivas or Cromartie that football team has that kind of can limit their running game or their passing game. But they've got a talented wide receiver core, Elliot Gonzalez. They've got Calvin Johnson to come over to replace Eddie Royal. LaFell, they've got a solid room and some up-and-comers. But really, it's just kind of their secondary that questions me, especially going up against Tyson Bravo and the Washington football team offense. But we'll see. They've improved. They stopped the run well. But if they can get over that hump of beating football team, they're a Super Bowl team. I mean, I'd say Dallas is one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the league, but they just can't get over that hump, and they're in a tough division. But once they get past football team, I think they'll be able to beat anybody. On to Denver. So we've got Burrell out to start the season. That's going to be kind of a tough blow. But they do have a young kind of up-and-comer in Randall Taylor, who's a rookie. His arm strength's a little bit low, so he's not going to quite match what Burrell can do. But he should be able to fill in pretty well. We'll see how he develops. But he's a young player, so it's going to take some time. Definitely need... let's see. So they got good running back in William Wagner. Weens to back him up. Strong guy in Wagner, so that's going to be a really solid player, but his endurance is low. So they're definitely going to want to run some kind of platoon with their running game. Maybe start Wagner and give Weens a lot of time, but they've got a lot of depth there, so they should be all right. Line play, pretty good. Strong on the line, kinda. One of their starters might be a little bit low strength, but he's agile, pretty quick for linemen as well, so they might be trying to pull a lot of guards and tackles, run outside a little bit maybe. Their left tackle position is solidified by probably Cliff Milburn. Wait, not Milburn, I'm sorry. Probably by Spearman. But again, that's kind of the knock on the Denver line is their strength is all pretty average. Outside of Gibbs, Peters, and Milburn, the rest of the line doesn't have quite the strength. They do have Dalton at center as well. That'll help. But that might be something they look to do, but they also might be in the development phase as well. Solid at tight end. They could probably use a little more speed balanced with hands, and I would expect Burrell to return back to his numbers of previous seasons. If they can kind of find one guy that combines good speed, good agility, and, plus 85 hands or so. They've got some good handsy guys in Putnam and Randall, but they're both really slow, so that's the only knock against them. They're faster guys to kind of air it out like Burrell was doing early in his career. They're going to drop some passes with the 79, 78, 76 hands. Corner position looks pretty solid and deep. they've got decent speed over there, lots of development guys, kind of a youth movement, but they should be pretty solid, at least 3 or 4 deep at corner. But they could maybe afford to find that solid corner, that solid number one lockdown corner. If none of these guys emerge this season, Poole, Jackson, or Herman, linebacking core is pretty good outside of it's pretty average outside of Carl Reed. Carl Reed's kind of going to be their mainstay. But they've also got, Hilliard's interesting, but he's undersized. Reed himself, he's interesting, but he's also undersized. So should be pretty good. But I do kind of just looking over the roster, it's going to be tough, especially with Burrell starting the season out hurt. Let's see where he's at. So he's doubtful, so he's probably going to miss the first couple weeks. Hopefully they can win without him, so he's not coming into a 0-2 and kind of a deflated locker room once he comes back. But Denver should be good. They've been good for years. They've had a great passing game, so interesting to see if they can kind of pull it out over there in the AFC South. I don't think there's a lot of competition. KC's kind of been emerging as they had a little bit of a deep playoff run last year, but will be interesting. Burrell's a great player. He's been one of the top QBs since he came out of college from Texas A&M, and we'll just see if he can get back to kind of where he was, because his numbers have started dipping a little bit. So back in 2015, he was completing 64% of his passes. Now he's dropped down to 55, 52, and he's not really keeping those lofty numbers that he had previously. And he also gets sacked a lot, and I would attribute that a lot to that line not having a lot of strength. 62, 66 sacks. They really need to work on that line, I'd say, and get some strength on their offensive line, and that'll really help them a lot. But I do expect Denver to compete for the division, but they might not quite be ready yet. They're kind of in transition. On to Detroit. They're finally going to have Armstead back full time, so expect him to really help that team. That's the difference in how they did last year versus what I expect this year. Their running game, might leave a little bit to be desired, but they do have Armstead and a solid crop of receivers. So if they can get a little bit of development out of the running game and maybe get some more speed combined with strength over there, because they've got like a strong guy in Bill Rao, but he's a little bit slow for running back. They've got Trask. They don't have a ton of speed. De La Rosa's quick. He could improve his strength. Once he does that, and if he can build some endurance and skill, finish completing his skill, maybe he could be the main guy. But we'll see if anybody emerges in the backfield for Detroit. I think a lot of their stuff and their passing game especially will hinge on that. But they've got a pretty young roster. Some aging wide receivers. Hard to say who their main guy will be this year. Maybe Martins or Kim Quinn. Quinn's their fastest. That's kind of the main knock, is just they've got decent speed, but it's not quite elite speed, like really anywhere. Let's sort it by speed. They've got 3 guys on the whole team that are plus 90 speed. That's not going to cut it against kind of the elite of the elite, I'd expect. So maybe they try to improve their team speed over the coming years. I'm going to kind of place them, a step behind the Bears right now. I think they'll finish below the Bears, maybe second place, but it's going to come down to them and kind of Minnesota, I think. I think the Packers are in transition, so I expect them to kind of finish toward the bottom of the division. But Detroit, it's hard to say. Maybe second place, but we'll know more as we get down to Minnesota and talk about them a little bit more. But solid roster. They just really need some more speed. On to Green Bay, who's moving on from Aaron Rodgers, who retired this past season. So it's interesting to see if it'll be Dortch who gets the main reps or if they're going to stick him behind Finley for a bit. Finley's been waiting patiently to get his chance, and now he might get it. But Dortch is young, has developed pretty decently, has a pretty solid arm, and could be their player of the future. They've also got, the new running back, best running back in the draft in Bruce Morton. Quick, agile, could improve his strength a little bit, but he's got great endurance. He already knows how to play the position. They also picked up another, pretty solid backup, maybe in Neil Rios out of Western Michigan. And then they've got Javid Best, who's been pretty good, even if he's, maybe a touch slow. But great hands out of the backfield. So if they can kind of figure it out, and if depending on how Dortch or Finley, whoever they go with, shakes out, they could be pretty good. They're pretty solid on the line. Decent strength across their guard position. Tackle position, strength leaves a little bit to be desired. They've got one, real strong guy in Feeney, but over on the right side of the ball, they're going to have a bit of a hard time. Center, they're solid there. Especially if they run some kind of platoon. Tight ends, not great. They've kind of got one and then a backup. So probably not many two tight end sets out of Green Bay. And then they've, got a lot of young receivers that need to improve. They've got Donald Haller, who's probably their main guy right now. But then, the depth kind of not quite there. Maybe Shepard can get there, but kind of all of their receivers have some kind of knock on them besides Haller. Haller's about the only one. And even then, Haller might be a little bit, could improve his strength. But he's going to be the main guy. He's fast enough to do it. He's got decent enough hands. Could improve that agility and strength. But they need to find a solid number 2 or maybe even number 3 option, because I think they play a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. But interesting to see how they develop. And then at corner, it's kind of the same deal. They don't have a lot of speed at corner, and that's going to be a big issue, especially going up against the likes of Washington football team, even the Bears and the likes like that. So should be a solid team, but I definitely expect them to be in transition. But they could finish around 500, depending on how their quarterback situation goes, and maybe if they can find an upgrade somewhere during the season at wide receiver. They just need a little more speed over there. That's the thing that kind of concerns me. We compare their speed. I mean, they've only got 3 players over at 90 speed on their squad, so that's kind of that's going to be telling to me. If they had a lot of guys kind of in the 80s too, that would be pretty good. But it's hard to say. I'm going to put them at 7-9 or 6-10 on the season. On to Houston. They should be pretty good, but without a human AD, they've got some talent over there. Decent speed, lines okay, decent strength on the line for sure. 200 linemen. Tackle is going to be probably an issue. Tight ends, not great, but they do have Cortez Weaver, who's pretty good, solid pass catcher from the tight end position. Decent wide receivers as well, but there's just not great leadership over in Houston, so I don't expect them to do much. They do have a good crop of corners with decent speed and great agility. Keaton and Peeler are solid there, but it's probably going to be Thompson and Peeler probably get the majority of the reps. But I don't expect them to finish all that well, even though they do kind of have quite a bit of talent I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot more guys in the 80s of speed versus, teams like Green Bay and the Lions. But maybe they'll get kind of someone in there to come manage it and turn that franchise around. They should be pretty good based on their talent levels, but they just don't have the leadership. On to Indy, and Indy's, they'll be back in the playoffs. I expect them to keep improving. They showed that their run, I think 2 seasons ago they started kind of like 4-7 or something, or 3-7, and then went on a run to finish the season. They kind of continued that run in the last season, and I expect them to keep on going. They've got Scott Tuck, who's been good for them over there, but they did pick up Kemp in the draft. We'll see how he develops. And they've also got Charles Jones, who's not too shabby of a backup. Running game, pretty good. They've got Coty, who's just awesome. They did find kind of a late round interesting player in Wim Naranjo. Jeez, I don't know how to pronounce that. And he's a Utah guy. Should be a solid team. I kind of expect Indy to win the AFC South. Not a ton of competition. Jacksonville was pretty good last year, but I still think Indy's going to pull it out. Good wide receivers. Do this team speed test that's kind of emerging as kind of a decent barometer. So, sort it by speed, and I mean they're way down the roster before you hit the 70s. So they've got a lot of good mid 80s guys, 5 guys over 90. They've got Burkholder over there, who's just a freak with that 98 speed. And then Reed really quick from the free safety position. So they've got a lot of speed on defense, especially, and in the secondary. So that's going to make it tough on a lot of teams. So I expect Indy to compete for a bye in the playoffs and be one of the better teams in the AFC for sure. Jacksonville, they kind of had a freak doing 90 quarterback. How many quarterbacks they got in a room? So they've got Means, Freeze, Daniel, Kraft, just tons of guys. Mark Sanchez still over there. Just way too many players. So 7 QBs on the roster, 3 running backs. Better hope that these running backs, they don't face a lot of injury because they don't have much depth at running back. I guess they're just going to try the seven-headed monster at QB or something. Pretty interesting. 4 wide receivers. They, not great. Undersized guys. Becknell's undersized. Moran's pretty good, but he still needs to develop. We'll see if they can kind of continue that magic they had last year. They surprised a lot of teams. That's probably predicated on their defense, frankly. Their linebacking core is good. They've got some decent corners. Free safety position, pretty quick. They picked up David Garcia, another guy out of Utah. He could improve his speed and agility for sure, but they've got Peterson in the meantime to hold down the fort. Strong safety position. Tuck's probably a little too slow to be your main guy at strong safety, but just depends on where you put him on the field. If he's lining up in the box a lot, may not be necessary. But Jacksonville, I'd probably list them as second place in the AFC South. On to KC. So AFC West, we'll see how they go. They've got Murillo and Clay Nolan. So Murillo's the new guy. Nolan's kind of entrenched. We'll see if they stick with Nolan or start giving Murillo some chances. But Nolan's still young. He's still got development possibility. Peebles is good. I mean, he's probably their best passer, their best pure passer. But he's in and out of the lineup, doesn't have a lot of endurance, and not very strong either. And that's kind of the knock on Peebles. He's just fragile and can't take a lot of hits. He's just not strong enough. That's been the knock on him. So if he can get that strength up enough, then he might be the main guy. But until then, it's Murillo or Noland probably. Hard to say if they give Murillo a look. He looks pretty solid for him. Where do they pick him up? So they picked him up at the end of the first round. Where was Nolan picked up? Nolan's a former 5th round pick. So that's a solid pick for him because Nolan looks a little bit better than Murillo, and Murillo was first rounder. But Nolan's got some development on him as well. Line is pretty decent. Lots of strength on the line. That's really going to help them out. That's probably going to be the main reason their running game is good. They picked up Hendrickson. They moved on from Purnell a couple seasons ago. Picked up Hendrickson in the draft last year. He had a great rookie year. Did he win Rookie of the Year? Yep, he was the Rookie of the Year last year. Hendrickson, running back. So out of West Virginia. Good speed, strength, agility, and he's going to continue to prove he's only 23 years old, so he'll be a solid player. But hard to say if they can win the AFC West. I still think it's Denver's division, but we'll see. Denver or the Chargers. Chargers are pretty good. That's who we're going to talk about next, and that's who I think's going to compete for the division. I think it's going to be Chargers and then Denver. KC, but who knows? KC surprised a lot of people last season, and they won a few playoff games as well, or a couple playoff games as well, or one playoff game anyway. So then on to the Chargers. Chargers are an interesting team. They've made a couple runs in the playoffs their first season. They've got some decent talent. Let's do the old speed sort. See, lots of good team speed there. Not quite where the elite teams are, but they're in the 80s on a lot of positions. That's really going to help them. Strength. They've got a strong line, strong D line. That's really going to help them as well. But their issue might be, so let's sort that speed again. Let's see, good at corner. Yeah, well, they've got speed at all the right places. So I do expect the Chargers to win the division this year. Be interesting to see who they go with at QB, whether they go with Pardo. So Pardo did not start last season, and he was a rookie. So let's see if they go with Brian Gray again. He's been pretty solid. He had kind of a late start to his career. Who got all the reps last year? Must be someone not on the team anymore. But Richard Vincent. Hard to say who they're going to go with out of the backfield. It's probably going to be Vincent. That's kind of what I'm expecting. He's probably their best combination of speed, agility, and strength. So probably Richard Vincent. He really hasn't gotten a lot of time over there, but maybe they're going to go with him this season. Solid wide receivers. Their line's strong. They're going to have some issues probably at tackle just because those players are younger, don't have a lot of endurance. D tackle's great. Defensive ends, pretty solid. Decent depth. Linebacking core looks great. Not like Dallas level speed in their linebacking core. They've got a couple players that are quick for sure, but it's just not across the board like Dallas's. Strong safety, maybe a touch slow. It's probably going to be Trout that is their main guy. He could maybe improve a little bit in his speed, but he's got excellent agility and he's a strong guy. And they've also got a solid tackler out of Schultz, who's also pretty strong. Not quite as agile, so he can't really play in a zone scheme. But they need to have some depth with Trout only having 66 agility. And then they've got Wyman, who is slow, probably way too slow to really be the main guy. But he can be a good mentor. Corner position looks solid. They've got 4 guys that are good speed out of the corner position. Free safety, good speed again. So with the team speed, I think Chargers are definitely gonna compete for that division. Onto the Rams, and they're under new management. Interesting to see who they go with at QB. Probably Lambert. I think he started all their games last year. He did, and he had a solid season. His rookie year was pretty solid, or not rookie, well, kind of his rookie year. He didn't really play until his 5th season in the league, and he's been a pretty solid player since he's come in. So if they can continue to improve with him, maybe being under new management will really help them. They don't really have a dearth of talent, so or they're not really missing much in the talent department. They definitely have some talented players. The good old speed test, look at that team speed, solid, awesome. So the Rams, they've got the team speed to compete, so let's see if the new GM can put it all together. Dolphins have consistently had one of the more talented rosters. They kind of didn't quite. Why did it take me here instead of to the Dolphins roster? They didn't quite live up to their expectations last year, and it'll be interesting to see if they start moving on from Henne and go with Womack, who's an undrafted guy, but he's kind of bounced around the league quite a bit. He's a solid player, just don't know why he really hasn't found a home. He hasn't quite performed the best, even though he seems like he should be a good player, but then he steps into the games and he's just not quite what you expect. But maybe they can kind of fix him in Miami. Henne's been, one of the top passers in the league, so would be interesting to see if they move on from him. I mean, he hasn't got them that Super Bowl win that they really would want. So we'll see. But they've got decent team speed as well. Decent team strength. Definitely strong on the lines. That's really going to help them. And they've got a lot of talented players. They tend to have one of the more talented rosters, as I said. So be interesting to see if they win the division again. But they've got the up-and-comer New England Patriots, who won the Super Bowl last season and kind of took them down as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that rival goes and if Miami can really, put it together and finally get that Super Bowl win. I think they've been a playoff team pretty regularly, gone to several conference championships. Yeah, so conference champions in 2017, and then last year they lost their only playoff game. I think they had a bye and then they lost it. Lost in the Super Bowl 2 seasons ago, won the division, lost in, division champions. So yeah, 2015, and they were under AR control. They won the Super Bowl as a 9-7 team, and then have been great since, but just haven't been able to rework that magic. But they should be another good, I expect them to be a 14-2, 13-3 type team this season. Minnesota, they're an interesting team. They've kind of dropped off down to 5-11 last year, but they've got Knutson, who spent his time in Dallas last season. He was starting for the Chargers a couple seasons ago, led him kind of on a deep playoff run. Been a solid player. See if that's who they kind of decide to go with. He kind of kicked around in Dallas last season, and maybe that solid Dallas training might have helped him. But maybe they decide to go with Dotson, either Dotson or Taggart. They probably don't. They're not quite smart enough to play the position, and Dotson especially just doesn't have the endurance. So it's probably going to be Knutson, and then we'll see. Maybe Dotson plays the backup role, but he's really got to improve his skill and his endurance, especially because quarterback handles a lot of snaps. So Dotson would be a solid player in spot minutes, but just not quite there to be the main guy yet. And then they've got Deal, who's good. Solid running game, do the good old team speed sorting, and decent enough speed, decent enough strength for sure. I do expect the Vikings to improve on their 5-11 season, but it's going to be tough because Bears are coming back stronger. Armstead's back in Detroit. So they're gonna really have to step up. But maybe Knutson's the answer for him. Maybe he helps him. He did great, even despite not having the best statistics when he was on the Chargers. He was a good leader, and Chargers tended to be at the top of the division, and they won a few playoff games. So we'll see how it goes with Minnesota. Good speed in the wide receivers, so that's really going to be something that Knutson didn't quite have prior, is like guys like Percy Harvin, Paul Walsh. They've got just pretty good players. William Easton they picked up, and he'll be a solid player for him if he can. He spent most of last year, he was in Washington, but he was hurt pretty much the whole season, so hopefully he can turn things around and be a little bit better this year. Their line's good. I mean, they've got the pieces. They've definitely got the pieces. Just got to put them together. Maybe their defensive tackles aren't the best, but they are strong. Just need to develop, get that endurance up. They're still pretty young at the defensive tackle position outside of Carlos Jack, who's in his ninth season. And he's a solid player, but then they're going to have to platoon probably with the lack of endurance for their number 2, Mahaffey. They're definitely going to want to get kind of a platoon behind him. He might end up getting pulled late in games. Linebacking core is good, and they've got another, they're another team that has a really fast linebacking core, so I expect them to do really well against the run. I mean, they've just got four guys in the linebacker room that's over 80 speed, one guy that's 90. But the thing that's interesting about Conway especially is he combines that speed and that agility, and he's really strong. So Conway's a guy you could almost move down and play at D end with that strength and combination of speed. But man, he's a great player for them. Picked him up in the draft. This will be his 4th season, and I expect him to continue to improve and just be a great player for him over there. But I expect him to do well against the run with that speed out of the linebacking core. Strong safety, again, just decent speed over there, decent speed on the corners. They've got Art Brown, they've got Cheyenne, they've got Peterman. Kind of a, definitely a little bit of some platoon action probably going to happen over there, but decent enough speed out of their corners. Carney's good. I recognize that name. Didn't he used to be on? Oh yeah, he was on my team last season. So Carney, he was a pretty good player. I was kind of bummed to see him go out of Washington, but we wanted to, we needed to get elite, so we had to go pick up Cromartie instead of Carney. But he's getting a chance. He'll probably get a chance for some playing time, more than he got in Washington, over there in Minnesota, and maybe he can improve that team. But they've got a lot of players, so they could platoon. They've got a lot of options at corner. Free safety, probably a little slow at free safety. They could probably use a guy 87, 88, 89 to kind of be their main dude. But Cone, pretty decent. But they'll be fine just because of all that speed they've got on the corners. It's good, strong safeties as well. So hopefully Minnesota, it'll be interesting to see how they do. On to New England. New England, man, I expect them to improve. It's going to be a lot of pressure because they kind of just stayed hidden behind Miami last season. Like Miami gets all the press because they've been a great team for a few seasons, but New England kind of came out of nowhere and they surprised everybody and took down the heavy favorite Washington football team in the Super Bowl in what was one of the best games I've seen. Nice comeback win. Bowling has just been a solid, just a solid guy, man. He's held that team together and he's really provided some great leadership. I definitely expect him to improve. Do the old team speed filter. They've got the speed for sure, that enough to be elite. Strength on the lines, enough to be elite for sure. So it's just a matter if they can kind of keep it going, and if they improved enough versus the other teams in their division, because I know the Bills are really looking to take a step up, and Miami's definitely going to be coming back for revenge. So I'm going to put the division down to either New England or Miami. But man, after winning that Super Bowl, I expect New England to compete and win that division and kind of supplant Miami. But of course, Miami's gonna come back and want to improve. So on to New Orleans, the New Orleans Saints. They got Eddie Griffin. They've got Nunez. He's not great. Their QB room's kind of in transition. Maybe Brandenburg's the guy. Maybe he's not. He, hasn't been great in his first two seasons. So don't expect that to improve all that immensely. And then Nunez hasn't been great either. And Reeves, he might be the answer, but he just looks like kind of a repetition of what they've already had in Nunez, Brandenburg. Now they've drafted Mark Reeves, but all of them have the same knock on them. They're just not the smartest guys. But they do have Eddie Griffin over there, and Griffin's solid out of the backfield, solid pass catcher out of the backfield. Decent tight ends. Their wide receiver room they've got Kenny Britt, who's pretty good, but they don't have speed, agility, strength, and hands all kind of matched together outside of maybe Frank Tejada. Tejada's definitely a good player. He's going to be their main guy. Hard to say with who they go with as their second option, probably Kearney. But just, they've got the receivers maybe in those two, along with Britt. They've got three probably solid guys, but hard to say if those QBs are going to be able to pull it off. Defense does not look great. They're definitely just scrolling down the thing. Their secondary is good, but their linebacking core's average at best. Defensive line, pretty average. free safety, they've got Malcolm Jenkins. I mean, hopefully he can make up, but they've also got Edward Katz. So they've got a couple, they've got some decent options in the secondary, but it kind of just seems really disjointed. It looks like a puzzle piece of several different GMs trying to put together a team and having their favorite players, and it feels a little disjointed, so I don't expect New Orleans to be all that great. On to the Saints. Or on to the Giants. Saints. So Giants, they've got Joseph Meyer. They picked up George Tompkins, and Tompkins looks like an interesting guy. Drafted in the 6th round. He could improve. He's smart. Just needs to improve his accuracy and his arm a little bit, but maybe he's their future. But they've got Joseph Meyer. Joseph Meyer, slow start to his career, kind of got his first real full-time opportunity to start last season. 19 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, so not great. So maybe they look to move on from Meyer. Maybe they give him another shot. But, Meyer, the real knock on him is just his smarts. And then they have Tompkins that they might want to go with, but Tompkins is going to want to improve his endurance. Running game, their running back room looks pretty good. Line looks decent enough. They're at least all strong. With the exception of center position. They might need to find a little more depth at wide receiver and tight end. They'll probably look at that over the season, but they do have some decent wide receivers in Augustine and Clark. It's just kind of who's going to be passing the ball to them, and whether they're up to the, it's like they've got a few game managers. I mean, Joseph Meyer has good accuracy and arm, but he just makes some real boneheaded decisions sometimes. That's hence why his 11 interceptions to 19 touchdowns last season. So corners, decent speed on the corners. Maybe a little bit, they definitely need some experience over there. So they're all young guys, but they do have Nicholas Sacco, who's demonstrated himself as being a solid number one option over there. Really strong too. So he's going to continue to improve and be a mainstay in the league for quite some time. They've also got Tyler Segura, who's improving but needs to continue to improve. Kind of especially in his tackling. He could afford to get a little bit stronger as well. Linebacking room, it's decent. A couple fairly quick players over there, but they just, kind of the same deal. Just need to get some experience under them. Not a lot of veterans, a lot of young guys over there. Defensive tackle looks pretty good, other than, pretty good. They're definitely strong. So just another thing of, young players outside of Cofield. Cofield's probably going to be their main guy, and he'll be pretty solid for him. He's strong. Could improve in the endurance, but definitely strong. Defensive end, that leaves a little bit to be desired. They definitely could use an upgrade over there, especially in the speed department. But Keller and Palmer, if they develop, get some endurance for Palmer, he could be a pretty good guy with his 77 speed there. But strength could afford to improve. If he could get that up to 83, 85 with that 77 speed, that's a pretty solid D end. But still needs to develop a little bit. But yeah, overall, I mean, Giants, they're in a tough division. With, I think Dallas and Washington football team are two of the best teams in the NFC. And so it's going to be hard to come in and supplant them. So I expect kind of a middling year, maybe 5 or 6 wins, but they're not going to be great. On to the Jets. So the Jets, Josh Freeman. The Jets are the Jets. They just don't have the management. It's an AI team. They've got decent team speed stretching all the way down. Lots of guys in the 80s, a few guys over 90, but their issue has really just been management. Just not a well-managed team, even if they end up with talented players. So I expect them to finish at the bottom of the AFC East, especially now that the Bills are controlled by a human GM. I maybe 3 wins for the Jets. Oakland, they're another interesting team. Strange decisions. But they do have Blakely. Blakely should be pretty good for them. But he's another guy that's kind of underperformed. Which could be... Whoa, what the hell just happened here? Don't take that away. He could be all right. They've got Jacoby Ford, but not a lot of other options. Really slow receivers, corners, decent speed. But, yeah, I mean, Oakland's not been great in their history. We'll see if they kind of put it together. That's their history. 6-10 last year, 9-6, and I think 9-6-1. I think they still had Sean Womack, who's now over in Miami, and they kind of let him go. So it's just a mismanaged franchise under AI control. Hasn't been great. Eagles, kind of same deal. There's their history, 8-8, 9-7. And they're in a tough division. So I think they've had talent as well, Pretty decent QB room. I mean, definitely they've got a few intriguing options that are developable. Probably Frankie Havens is the main guy over there. If he can stay in the lineup. That's kind of the main issue with him. He's had some injury problems, spent a lot of 2017 on injured reserve. But he did come back pretty decently next year, but he needs to improve quite a bit. They've also got Chris Beebe, who's a pretty solid running back over there. Solid other guys. Do they meet the speed test? Yeah, they do have decent speed. How's their team strength? Decent enough team strength, especially on the line, and that's probably what's, the trenches are probably what's helping them. If they could get some management over there, I mean, Philadelphia does have some talent that they look like they could make some noise, but we'll see. They're in a tough division, and now they're the last team that's kind of under AI control. So I expect them to finish at the bottom of the NFC East. Steelers moved on from Big Ben. Hard to say who they're going to go with for the main reps. Probably Wood. Yeah, it's probably going to be Wood. Wood started 6 games last year, 12 games the season before. He's been solid. He's developing. I expect him. Yeah, where did Wood go to school? So Wood's from Navy, huh? That's pretty interesting. And not even like all that impressive of a career at a Navy either. Then they've got Mendenhall in the backfield. They're another team that just looks like they should be good. Like, especially look at all that speed they've got. But, I mean, redundant. Ludwig, Ramirez. I mean, only one guy can play that position. So they'll probably shift someone over to play nickel and dime slot positions. But they do have the speed. They do have the strength. It's just probably management that they've got to get in order to really improve. So on to the 49ers. Oh, and I just got a warning that I need to plug some power in. So give me just uno momento. Power going, and back on to San Francisco. Interesting to see who gets the start over there. Maybe it's Trevino. Probably Valenzuela again, though. He had a pretty solid season, but he hasn't been spectacular. Um, they've got good team speed, good strength. Oops. Running back. I mean, they've got Sherwood Culpepper, who looks good. They've also got Kuykendall. Man, some of these names. Quentin Lyles could probably improve tight ends. They don't have options at wide receiver, really. Mendoza's, he's kind of past his development time. And he's going to be their main option, but I'd look at him as more of a, number 2 or number 3, but he does have good size and he's fast. So it's a good combination, but he's kind of straight line fast. He's not going to make a lot of cuts. The other guys, they could be good. Especially Pardo, he's interesting. But he'll want to tick that speed up a little bit. Their line is definitely solid though, so their line looks really good, actually, like overly good. Like they could play five deep at guard, 3 deep at center, 5 deep at tackle. They've only got 2 defensive tackles on the roster. They definitely need more. D end doesn't look great. Linebacker Patrick Willis, I mean, he's one of the better players in the league, so he should be pretty good. And then they've also got Sainez, so they might be pretty decent against the run with that speed they have at the linebacking core, but really hard to say. San Francisco's notoriously kind of underperformed, even with having some talent. Couple winning seasons. They made the playoffs last year, but they were eliminated pretty quick. On to Seattle, and Seattle's also under new management. They were a solid team. They're on their 4th season of kind of being in a rebuild mode. They tried to pick up Eli Manning's a few seasons ago to try and do something, but he quickly burned out in Seattle. Well, I guess it's been a lot more seasons than I thought back in 2013. So he's burned out in Seattle. So it's probably Lemons is the main guy. Not quite smart enough to probably be the main guy. But maybe they go with Leary. That would be an interesting prospect. Leary doesn't have the arm to really play a long passing game, but he's smart and has accuracy. His endurance is good. And he's on a good contract. So maybe they give Leary a chance, because really, like, Eli Manning didn't work out. Lemons, he's been okay, average. He hasn't been great. So maybe, maybe they give Leary a chance. They're not much to lose, as there aren't a lot of expectations, and they're still in rebuild mode. They do have some decent running backs. Probably the main guy is going to end up being Tinker. Yeah, it's hard to say. All of their running backs could improve in agility. So it's probably going to be Burke, but Burke's, he's a touch slow, only 84 speed. Their line looks okay. Tight ends look okay. Wide receivers, they got Jay Collins and Stephen Neal, but still need some development time. They've got some aging players. They got to clear some contracts out. Once they do that, they'll get a better opportunity to really improve things, especially once they get rid of that albatross of Eli Manning. Man, they got to be just praying for that guy to retire. He's expensive, and he's not your main guy, so it's kind of a tough spot to be in. So that's kind of their main knock, is they've got a lot of youth. but they've got to put it together, and they've also got to fix that cap situation so they can put some talent around. I mean, maybe it's Son Leary. Maybe he's the guy. I'd probably be giving him a chance this season. Tampa. Sam Bradford, probably the main dude. They did pick up DeMarcus Gardner, who looks interesting, but he's going to need some development time. Decent wide receivers. David Pounds has been there for a long time. He has been pretty solid for him. You know, he's catching about 1,000 yards every season, but you know, Tampa hasn't won much. They've got Bradford over there, but they need to get somebody to manage all that talent that they've got. They last made the playoffs in 2016. They've kind of been just a middling 8-8, 7-9 team for years, but they do have some talent, and they've got Bradford, so hopefully they can figure out a way to make it work and put some things together this season. Their strength is pretty good on the line. They've got some interesting guys at running back. Probably Wayne Gatlin's going to be their guy, but maybe it's Jody Williams, but probably a platoon between the two of them. Their team speed looks pretty good. Team strength looks decent. That's kind of where they're probably missing a little bit is, you know, maybe some strength, maybe a little bit of speed. But we'll see. We'll see if they can quit being a middling team and take the next step. Titans. So Titans, they've got William Cullen, who's been good over there for them. He's kind of underperformed based on what I feel like he should, based on his attributes. And so let's explore why that might be. Could be, it's probably not the running game. Line looks like it has decent strength. Wide receivers look pretty decent. So maybe just mismanagement. Not a lot of speed in their linebacking core. Their defensive tackles are pretty good, but they're not elites of the elites, and a few of them are still developing. They did pick up, you know, kind of an interesting prospect in Whitaker, though. He could develop into something. He's got strength already. Defensive end, they definitely don't have any elite players. You know, a lot of solid kind of average filler guys. They've got two decent strong safeties, Daly and Hammett. And that's an interesting position to have some speed. So a lot of their speed's in the deeper secondary, so they'll be able to keep the passing game in front of them probably. But they're going to struggle in some aspects, and I'd expect teams to be able to run pretty well against Tennessee, and that's going to be, you know, tough prospects for them. So that brings us, I think Washington. Is that the last team? Wow, we're done already. So Washington, I mean, obviously they're favorite to win the NFC again. You know, they had an interesting player come through. Let's see, they drafted Mercado, who looks pretty solid. They've got Tyson Bravo, who's entrenched. And then Matthew Randall, they picked him up kind of just off the scrap heap, and he had a really great training camp with them. Went from, I think he was an 84 overall to like an 88. You know, really improved his arm strength. That was kind of the knock, and his accuracy. So we'll see. You know, Randall might be a guy that finds a place. I don't expect him to ever supplant Bravo. Well, in fact, I know he's not because it's my team. Purnell, Ray. They picked up Leno Harms, who's a good pass catcher out of the backfield. Kind of a good short yardage back. They've got a lot of platoons, good strength on the line. We can check the speed test too. Yeah, I mean, interesting enough. So these teams that have lots of speed, when I see lots of guys in the 90s, down to 10 or so players, I expect them to be pretty good. And yeah, they go 80 speed players pretty deep into the roster. So obviously we've got good receivers. We picked up Garcon this year. So Nick Christian used to be our number one receiver. He just doesn't have the hands. And then Petway should move up, but it'll be nice to have a real true elite wide receiver in Garcon as the main guy. So I expect Bravo to have a great season again. He's been good even despite all that. D-line, solid, probably the best corner tandem, or one of the best corner tandems in the league between Rivas and Cromartie. Vance Fitzgerald is good. They've also got Robert Messina, who's transitioning over from strong safety to free safety. Brought Dietrich back, Morton Jordan. They lack a little bit of speed in the linebacking core, and that's kind of the one real knock. So maybe some teams will be able to run pretty well against them, but they do have a really strong D-line with Haywood, Abdul Bach. Then they've got Daniel Bach, Luther Kenny, William Smith. Strength, speed combinations out of D tackle.